Hello and greetings, everyone. In our constant endeavor to bring to you the table discussions and dialogues on alternate fuel options for the country, the Center for Auto Policy and Research, CAPR, and Mobility Outlook brings to you today a discussion on gaseous fuels. Many of you who have participated in our dialogues on multi-fuel mobility series in the past would be aware that we have focused on ethanol, hydrogen, and the EV ecosystem in the previous three sessions. Gaseous fuel-powered vehicles are environmentally friendly, causing less CO2 emissions into the atmosphere than gasoline and diesel. Among the naturally occurring gaseous fuels, natural gas and liquefied petroleum gas, which have high calorific value, most important as they have lower energy content than both petrol and diesel. With dwindling fossil fuel resources, gaseous fuel-powered vehicles offer a medium to long-term solution. At the same time, natural gas is economically convincing. Considering the opportunities and challenges, our session today would deliberate on the trends and applications of gaseous fuels. Ladies and gentlemen, to share the perspectives on the subject and to take all our questions on the subject, we are indeed honored to have with us today four distinguished speakers. Please join me in welcoming Mr. Giok Seng, Executive Director at the Asia Pacific Natural Gas Vehicles Association, a professional engineer registered with the Board of Engineers Malaysia, and a member of the American Society of Mechanical Engineers and Institution of Engineers Malaysia. Mr. Seng started work in Petronas, the Malaysian National Oil and Gas Company, in 1984 as a test and field trial engineer. In 1991, he was involved in the development, promotion, and commercialization of ANGVA in Malaysia by Petronas as the engineer in charge of vehicle conversions and development of Malaysian standard for natural gas vehicle conversions and installer training and certification program. It was in August 2007 that he was seconded from Petronas to the Asia Pacific Natural Gas Vehicles Association as an executive director, promoting the development and promotion of NGV markets in the Asia Pacific region. He retired from Petronas in November 2013 and was subsequently appointed on contract as executive director by ANGVA in 2014, a position he continues to hold till date. Our next speaker today is Mr. D. Balakrishnan, who's currently General Manager of Product Development at Ashok Leyland. Mr. Balakrishnan is also the co-chair in the SIAM gas group. He has over 32 years of experience in vehicle validation, homologation for both domestic and export markets, as well as proto build. He is a fellow mechanical from the Institution of Engineers. Representing the Delhi Transport Corporation, our third guest today is Mr. K.C. Gupta, Deputy Chief General Manager, Strategic Business Unit, DTC. A mechanical engineer from the 1984 batch of Aligarh Muslim University, Mr. Gupta joined DTC in 1986 as a manager after working in private companies for about 2 years. In his current role, he looks after the projects related to procurement of new buses. Till 2012, he was working as depot manager in different depots of DTC and looking after the administration, maintenance, and operation of DTC buses. Thereafter, he has been looking after the projects for induction of new CNG as well as electric buses. Our final speaker today is Mr. K.K. Gandhi, a renowned auto and fuel expert and the convener of the Center for Auto Policy and Research. He is also the founder member secretary of the Hydrogen Association of India, director at A1 Motors, director at Strategic CSR Alliance, and the principal advisor to the Society of Indian Automobile Manufacturers since 2018. Prior to that, Mr. Gandhi was the executive director technical at SIAM from November 1999, heading all the technical activities in the association. Mr. Gandhi piloted the voluntary initiatives on future emission roadmap, emission warranty, fuel economy information and labeling for passenger cars and two-wheelers, voluntary vehicle recall, etc., offered by the industry. He was member of various government policy committees, including Expert Committee on Auto Fuel Vision and Policy 2025, Air Quality Monitoring, Emission Inventory, and Source Appointment Study for Indian cities, etc. Gentlemen, welcome to this session on gaseous fuels. Now, before I invite Mr. Lee Seng for his presentation and initial comments, I wish to remind our delegates today, that you can share your questions with all our experts using the Q&A box at the bottom of your screens. Now, without further ado, please join me in welcoming Mr. Seng for a thorough perspective on natural gas as a fuel for vehicles. Mr. Seng, welcome once again. It's a pleasure to have you with us today.
Thank you, Mr. Deepangshu, moderator. I have about 8 slides of a presentation. Quickly go to more on the status of the natural gas vehicle in the Asia Pacific region. Can you see my slide?
Yes.
Okay, good. Okay. Now, as we all know, transport sector is crucial to the economic well-being and growth of a country. It moves people and goods. It's very important to create economic activities and opportunities. But it's also a major consumer of final energy consumption, about 30 to 40% in most countries, mainly in the form of gasoline and diesel. And it's also impact on the energy security, affordability, and availability of a country, because oil price, gasoline and diesel depend on oil, and oil are quite volatile in the prices and very unpredictable. As you can see now, the price of oil is just going up like crazy. Now, in terms of environment, there's a major impact on the environment from the transport sectors, especially in the city. Most of the air pollution from the vehicles. Transport sector is a major contributor to GHG emission, 23% of global energy-related CO2 emissions. It's the third largest contributor of CO2 after power and industry. And it's also growing very fast in terms of emission, and it's expected to double by 2050 if we do not do anything to it. So anything to do with the 1.5 degrees Celsius scenario must include low carbon transport as the central element of the program or the policy. Now, fuel for transport. In the transport sector, I basically say there are 4 main components: the road, and then the type of vehicles, and the people that drive it, the people that take the transport, the maintenance guy, all these things. But today we are discussing more on the fuels, and mobility is connected to transport and fuels. And mobility is very important because it provides opportunity for individuals to go beyond their home environment, go to work, provide services, go and purchase goods, and also to go for leisure, etc. So in terms of fuels, there are 2 traditional fuels, as we know, gasoline and diesel, and then there's the alternative fuel. Okay. So I'll just go back again quickly. As I said, the transport sector is very important to the economic well-being and growth of a country because it moves people and goods, but it consumes about 30 to 40% of the final energy consumption of a country in the form of gasoline and diesel mostly. So it impacts on the energy security, ability, and affordability of a country because oil price and supply are volatile and unpredictable. As you can see now, suddenly the oil price shoot up because of some event somewhere. Please, next please. In terms of environment, the vehicles or transport have a major impact on the environment. As you know, in the city, the vehicles are a major source of air pollution. It's also a major source of greenhouse gases emission. 23% of the global energy-related CO2 emissions. It's the third largest of CO2 emission after power and industrial sectors. And it's without rapid mitigation to reduce this, transport sectors is projected to double the emissions. And any path that we take to achieve the 1.5 degrees Celsius scenario must include low carbon transport as a central element. Next, please. Okay. Transport means movement of goods and mobility of people. And I classified there are 4 main infrastructure or what you call related to transport. There are the roads. The road must be there, must be in good condition. The vehicle must be there, what type of vehicle, and then the fuels and the people. And transport mobility is very important because it's opportunity for individuals to undertake fundamental tasks beyond the home environment, like going to work, providing services, purchasing essential goods, go for holidays, etc. Next, please. Okay, we are discussing today more on the fuels. And there are two types of fuels available out there, the traditional fuels of gasoline and diesels, and the alternative fuels. There are also liquid alternative fuels, and we know biofuels in terms of biodiesel, ethanol, methanol, renewable diesel. Now the in thing now is the electrofuels. The fuel is produced from the electricity, green electricity, especially ammonia, etc. Gaseous fuel is what we are going to discuss today, mainly natural gas, fossil natural gas, CNG, LNG. Now there is a renewable natural gas, biomethane, in terms of bio-CNG and bio-LNG, and there's the hydrogen, and of course, auto gas and LPG, and the other one is the electricity. Next, please. For natural gas vehicle worldwide, in 2021 December, this is the estimate. Nobody is keeping count of it anymore, so nobody have the exact numbers, but I estimated that by December 2021, there's around 30 million vehicles, natural gas vehicle, serviced by 37,000 stations. And this is the top 10 countries in the world in terms of population. As you can see, China lead by around 7 million, Iran 5 million, India 3 million. My numbers there might not be exact, I think it's close enough. And in China, they are growing quite rapidly in terms of LNG. There are 820,000 LNG vehicles by end of December 21, serviced by 4,600 LNG. That's the largest country with LNG vehicles and LNG stations. In terms of the Asia Pacific region, these are the 22 countries that have LNG, with few millions from China, right now a few hundreds in countries like Vietnam. New Zealand, I guess there's no more NGV vehicle there. They used to have around 250,000 vehicles at one time. So this is the country in the region that has some LNGV running there. And that is the area where the association is operating or traveling. Next, please. In terms of the chart growth, you can see that in the 22 countries, you can see in China growing very fast, but in 2020, there's a slight dip because of the CNG vehicle being converted back or not using anymore, but still growing in terms of LNG. As you can see, in terms of station, China is still growing mostly in terms of LNG station to serve the LNG vehicles. Then Iran, recently they have announced a lot of programs, incentive from the government, so it's probably picking up again. And as we all know, India is growing very well. I guess in terms of worldwide now, I observe that India is the only country that is growing aggressively in terms of NGV, beside maybe Egypt. And then we have Pakistan, which I think is stagnating because of the CNG supply, and the other country is too small to discuss here. But some of them are growing, some of them are just stagnant. Next, please. So the current challenges faced by the NGV industry is this that we have observed. NGV markets in many countries have slowed down. In some countries, it stopped growing, and in some countries, it went into a decline. So there's a decline, for example, in countries like Malaysia, Thailand, in China it's growing, in India it's growing. So in Singapore, it's completely stagnant. I think it's coming to zero soon for Singapore. And Indonesia is still struggling, going up, going down, or not. Policy is still there, but then again, this is the condition of the NGV industry. And lack of NGV refueling infrastructure is still a major obstacle to NGV, pipeline, NGV stations, and all these things. And in most countries, the CNG, LNG price are cheaper than gasoline and diesel. Thus, many vehicle owners fleet owner converted to CNG or LNG because of the price. But because of the price being too low and also controlled by the government, in most cases, this is not attractive to the gas supplier. Some of them lost money, some of them don't make return on investment, so they are reluctant to expand the infrastructure. Some of them just close the station. So in most cases, this is the case. That's why NGV infrastructure could not grow as desired. Next, please. Now, as we all know, now climate change, global warming are the top global issue, and usage of fossil fuel by the transport sector is a major contributor. Natural gas is a fossil fuel, but it is the cleanest fossil fuel for the transport sectors. And as we know, clean renewable energy becomes a major pathway for the transport sector to reduce greenhouse gases and achieve sustainability. So for NGV to move forward also, we have to look at renewable energy supply. And we are lucky because we have biomethane or renewable natural gas to be there for us to harness. Next, please. Now, a little bit challenges for the NGV is that because the electric vehicles and hydrogen vehicles have been heavily promoted and subsidized by the government in many countries, such that they sideline NGV. NGV just is not in the equation of the government promotion anymore. That's why it's been left by itself. That is a major challenge to the NGV industries. But then you look at the electric buses and vehicles, for example, they are good for the city usage, but the process of replacing existing vehicles and providing recharging infrastructures is very time consuming and very expensive. And you can see what's happening now. There's a lot of money have been allocated to this electrification of the transport sectors. The other thing is that their lack of knowledge, operational experience, skilled personnel to operate and manage electric vehicle. As you can see in the fleet of buses, they cannot operate effectively and efficiently in terms of their scheduling, in terms of usage. So much so that some have problems with the electric buses because I think they are moving too fast. That they forgot that the people side have to be trained and have to be ready to undertake the operation and management of the electric buses or electric vehicles. Next, please. Now, to me, natural gas still have a future as fuel for vehicles. It will continue to be used and has an important role to play in achieving carbon neutral. Because conversion of diesel vehicle, gasoline vehicle to NGV is very straightforward. It can be deployed quickly to reduce air pollution, and then you can start saving fuel costs because the price of CNG and LNG is always cheaper than diesels and petrol. And there's no need for new powertrains or new platforms. Conversion can be done by OEM, factory fittings, and aftermarket conversions. And then the usage of LNG for heavy-duty vehicles and long-distance trucks are currently the best route to quickly reduce harmful diesel emissions and save costs. This is the fastest way to reduce emissions immediately. And the retail price of CNG and LNGs are normally less than gasoline and diesel, and the price is less volatile. And then usage of renewable natural gas or biomethane, as I stated just now, provide opportunity for the NGV industry to be carbon neutral and sustainable. Next, please. Now, like I say, NGV is a quick and sure pathway for road transport to reduce harmful exhaust emission and greenhouse gases emission to meet the 1.5 degrees Celsius scenario. There are already around 30 million NGVs in operation worldwide. We are already reducing the emissions of the greenhouse gases and pollutions. The infrastructure is already there. It's already in existence. So we can just use renewable natural gas and biomethane, this infrastructure without much modification. And in fact, it's moved also to mix hydrogen with natural gas to use the same pipeline infrastructures to bring the gas or hydrogen to the place of usage. Next, please. Just a little bit on the EVs. In 2020, there were around 1.4 billion internal combustion engines vehicles worldwide, and it's projected to be around 1.75 billion in 2020. Now, the IEA in the recent EV 2021 outlook stated that in 2020, there was around 12 million EVs. So that's about less than 1% of the 1.4 billion internal combustion engine. And the outlook projected in a very good sustainable scenario, there will be 240 million vehicles, electric vehicles in 2020, as compared to projected a 1.75 billion internal combustion engine by that time. There's around maybe 12%, around 13.7%. And that's only about less than 10 years to go. That means you will have to convert around 22 million vehicles, electric vehicles a year. So I think that's quite a big tall order. But anyway, we have to keep pushing, but we cannot forget the existing internal combustion engine, especially the heavy duty vehicles, which are also a major polluter because they use mainly diesel. So we can wait. Do we wait until we convert all the internal combustion engine to electricity, or do we do something now to this existing internal combustion engine? It's too late for us to record a tipping point for 1.5 degrees scenario. Once we reach the tipping point, there's no way of turning back. We will have to live with the consequences. Okay, next, please. Before I say goodbye, thank you. I just want to invite you to join our 9th International Conference and Exhibition, our 2022. It happened to be scheduled to be in Mumbai, India, 29th to 30th November. Hopefully by that time, there is no more restriction in traveling to overseas. The theme is very interesting because we call it natural gas vehicle, the gateway to a carbon neutral future. You can go to our the website ANGVA2022.org for more information on this. Next, please. So next, thank you, gentlemen, for your time. Okay, thank you. I'll pass back to the moderator.
Thank you, Mr. Seng, for that very important presentation and also raising some very pertinent questions. Primarily, the last point: can we really afford to wait for electrification, to meet the 1.5 degree scenario? That's an important question which we will take to all our panelists today. But before we do that, we have with us Mr. Balakrishnan from Ashok Leyland. Mr. Bala, over to you for your initial thoughts on the subject today, and also an industry perspective on the gaseous fuels.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Deepangshu. So apart from Ashok Leyland, I also represent the gas-based mobility group in SIAM. So as SIAM, we are focusing to debottleneck whatever elements that hinder the development of CNG and LNG vehicles. So the focus now is more towards using or extending the use of CNG-based vehicles. When we started in 1999, as Gandhi sir initially told us in the pre-meeting, so from Delhi, the gas availability has shifted all across. Almost major portion of country has been covered. Our Ministry of Petroleum and Natural Gas has put a very clear roadmap, and today we are over 2,000 gas stations, and the plan is to go reach a target of around 10,000 gas stations across the country within 10-year period of time. So this means that the gas availability is going to be across the country, and the range anxiety is not going to be a criteria for CNG vehicles. So what started as a within city operation, now the range we could do intermediate range up to 150 to 200 kilometers, since the fuel availability has extended. So the fuel availability is a very good positive outlook that we get from the government, and it's a good selling point for us to tell the customer that we have more applications that you can cover with a CNG vehicle. The second point from a vehicle point of view is there's adequate technology available. We have enough the parts available within the country, so that we are able to give a CNG vehicle at an affordable cost to the customer. So if someone wants the range of 250 to 300 kilometers, we have steel cylinders that can be packaged into existing vehicle without much major challenge. So I'm not getting into the retrofit mode, but as an OEM, we are able to offer a vehicle which just replaces what used to operate in diesel. Still, another point I would like to highlight is we are able to get into the composite cylinders. So the steel cylinders for a multiple cylinders packaging offer a slight inconvenience to the customer because he loses the minor portion of the payload. So that if that technology evolves, it's going to offset any parity in the payload. The third point which I would like to mention about CNG is now the diesel price has gone up, the motivation for customer is the operational cost is going to be less when he switches to CNG. So he moves into CNG vehicle. So it becomes attractive for him from a business point of view. Having said this, in recent times, I mean, even in recent past, we had the diesel and other fuel remaining stable. Only CNG price has gone up. There was a revision of up to 6 rupees in last 2 weeks for CNG. You know, the price volatility of the CNG fuel becomes a concern for the customer. So if there's a stable price regime for CNG, so that will be a very good attractive point for the customer. And like EV, CNG is also more environment friendly as compared to other fuels. Certainly, the CO2 footprint is less. So some encouragement we look forward, which we can pass on to customer, either in terms of a GST or some road tax infrastructure. You know, the road tax and other stuff are related to both central and state government. So like incentives given to EVs, if something is given for CNG vehicles, so it will attract more customers to turn towards it. So as I said, the ecosystem is developing well. Few of the encouragements from both government and the industry development will help us move towards CNG. The next I would like to talk about LNG. For heavy duty vehicles, the LNG option is coming up. Few stations have come up in the coastal region where the fuel is imported and made available to us. So again LNG, the refueling infrastructure cost seems to be very high. But still government is supporting in establishing the fueling stations. So the next wave of gaseous fuel use we see in long haul vehicles. So the LNG infra and augmented effort by all the OEM to develop LNG vehicles will enable more vehicles switching to LNG mode also. So as I say, you know, the industry is eagerly looking forward for this. Our interest is to have a close tie-up to understand how the fuel network develops, and so that we can focus on providing right products in those regions so that customers benefit from it. The environment benefit is also taken. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Bala, for that short but important observations on the CNG as well as the LNG situation in the country. You did mention that like electric vehicles, the CNG or natural gas industry also needs some sort of policy encouragement from the government, right, which will go a long way in establishing this network in the country. We will, of course, raise those questions in the coming times. We also have with us now Mr. Gupta. Before I invite Mr. Gupta, I wanted to inform the panel that Mr. Gupta has to leave at 11:45 due to a pressing meeting. But Mr. Gupta, welcome. Appreciate you joining us today. Please share with us your initial thoughts and also give us a perspective from a consumer standpoint from DTC, how DTC has gone on to become the largest fleet operator of CNG vehicles in the country. Mr. Gupta, you're on mute. Mr. Gupta, you'll have to unmute yourself, please. Yeah.
Thank you, everybody, for giving me opportunity to speak on this forum. So I'll talk only from DTC's perspective point of view, how DTC has transformed itself from this diesel to CNG, and now we are shifting to electric buses. So from the starting, I want to give some introduction about DTC. DTC was constituted in 1971 under Road Transportation Act 1950. Since then, DTC was operating diesel buses. DTC earlier used to buy a chassis and then get the body fabricated on the chassis. Thereafter, till 1998, Supreme Court ordered that all the diesel fleet will be converted into CNG fleet. So DTC accordingly started converging from diesel to CNG fleet. Presently, DTC has a fleet of 3760 low-floor AC and non-AC CNG buses and 2 low-floor AC electric buses, which are being operated from 36 depots spread all over Delhi. The low floor buses are being maintained by the vehicle manufacturer itself under comprehensive AMC, and we are making payment to the respective vehicle manufacturers on rate per kilometers. The initially contract was up to 750,000 kilometers for maintenance, but later on, in view of the life of the CNG vehicle up to 15 years, the contract has been extended further up to 2025. That means DTC buses, CNG buses will operate up to the year 2025. Delhi is the only state in India where all the CNG fuel mode buses are being operated presently. DTC had diesel mode of buses up to the year 2000, and thereafter CNG buses were inducted as per the order of the Honorable Supreme Court passed in 1998. Delhi is one of the air polluting cities in the world. One of the major causes of the air pollution is the emission discharge from vehicles operated in the city. This is more in the case of vehicles with diesel fuel mode. The air pollution that disturbs the environment further causes several health hazards. While switching over from diesel fuel mode buses to CNG fuel mode, DTC faced twin challenges, both from the manufacturers of CNG mode buses and supplier of CNG, as both had monopoly. Further challenge was with VMs for training of staff for new technology and maintenance /safety aspects of buses. Then laying of CNG pipelines /infra and resistance from diesel suppliers. The objective of induction of CNG fuel mode buses in the fleet of DTC was to reduce the air pollution by eliminating diesel fuel mode buses. On the order of the Honorable Supreme Court in 1998, 2970 standard floor CNG fuel mode buses and thereafter 3775 low floor CNG buses were procured during 1999 to 2011. Standard floor CNG buses, since they have completed their life, they have already been scrapped, and low floor buses will gradually be scrapped from the fleet based on kilometers /age covered and operate. And these buses will be operated till 2025. That means all the CNG buses flying in the city will complete their life up to 2025 buses. DTC has become world's largest CNG operated eco-friendly bus transport operation. Operation of CNG mode buses and withdrawal of diesel mode buses has reduced the vehicle pollution in Delhi significantly. Now I want to bring comparison of the pollutants in diesel and CNG buses. The CO in case of carbon monoxide in case of diesel fuel buses was 2.4 gram per kilometer, whereas in the CNG it is 0.4 gram per kilometer. That is, the carbon monoxide has been reduced to 83% almost. Further, NOx 21 gram per kilometer in case of diesel buses and 9 gram per kilometer. That is, NOx gases have reduced to the extent of 58%. Particulate matter is 380 mg per kilometer in case of diesel buses, and it is 12 mg per kilometer in case of CNG buses. That is, particulate matter has been reduced to almost 97%. Advantage of CNG buses. Since CNG fuel is odorless and not having any bad smell, therefore passengers feel comfort in breathing. Safety and cleanliness in depot /workshop yard have also increased with the induction of CNG fuel mode buses in comparison to diesel fuel mode buses. From safety point of view, present DT is having 12 CNG leakage checking centers, which are scattered all over the city, where CNG leakage in buses is periodically checked after every 3 months. Besides, the DTC has also 41 pollution checking centers, where after every 15 days, buses are being checked for pollution level. In future, DTC is planning to switch over to electric buses. The process of engagement of 300 low-floor electric buses under FAME2 scheme, that is OPEX model, has already started. And as on date, 2 buses, electric buses, that is AC low-floor, have already been inducted and are flying. The response from the public is very good. These 300 buses under OPEX model, under FAME2 scheme of Government of India, are expected to be completed in May 2022. Further, DTC has also participated in the Grand Challenge scheme of CSL, that is subsidy of ESL, for the engagement of 1,500 electric buses. These buses will also be low-floor AC electric buses. So, in the end, I want to say that slowly DTC is now going to plan to switch over from CNG buses to electric buses, and we hope in the coming years DTC will be having the largest fleet in electric buses, as previously it was largest in the CNG. Nowadays, thinking of operating largest fleet of electric buses for the convenience of people. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Gupta, for giving us a lowdown on how DTC really started inducting CNG buses in the country. And you've also given us, you've told us that by 2025, DTC will switch over, will stop plying the CNG buses, and gradually DTC will switch over to electric buses in the coming times. Mr. Gupta, thank you for sharing those insights with us. Our final speaker today is Mr. K.K. Gandhi. Mr. Gandhi, your initial comments on the subject today.
Yeah, good morning, everyone. Great pleasure to be here amongst experts from the various disciplines. We have heard the consumer perspective, we have heard the industry perspective, and also from the Asia Pacific region, and what are the major challenges before the CNG industry. Well, I have been associated with CNG right from the time when it was in inception. I do remember at that time when Ministry of Petroleum and Natural Gas, through GAIL, was trying to bring in CNG into this country. That's almost about 20 years back. And I happened to be the first man to have a type approved CNG retrofitment of a Fiat car when I was in the Indian Institute of Petroleum, where we are authorized by the Ministry of Road Transport to carry out the type approval of CNG vehicles. Since that time, we have come a long way, and I have seen how the industry has grown. As a consumer perspective, from a consumer angle, I would like that CNG, whether it is clean or not clean, but as a consumer, I would like to have a minimum cost per kilometer of travel. And that's where CNG has scored in India, particularly I've seen in Delhi, where all people who have been traveling long gradually switched over to CNG. But having said that, we also have to look at from the Government of India's perspective, where they talk about 2 objectives. One is energy security, and the second one is from the angle of zero emissions. So from the energy security angle, if you look at CNG does not really find a place, because again, it has to be imported, and still we are importing a large quantities of natural gas. But if you look at from the zero emission angle, again, CNG is not a zero emission vehicle per se. If you look at from the long perspective of the government, they would like to definitely move on to EV and hydrogen, which is the biggest challenge to natural gas. But as Mr. Lee was pointing out very correctly, that what do we do in bridging the gap between now until 100% EV is introduced into the country? And that's where I feel CNG now plays a very, very important role and can mitigate the pollution, where even in today's newspaper, I was reading that amongst the capital cities of the world, Delhi happens to be the most polluted city in the world as such, most polluted capital in the world. But if you look at from sheer pollution angle, well, India is Delhi is number 3, but most of the 15 cities in the top 25 or 20 happen to be from India only, which also shows that till we are reaching the goal of 100% EV, natural gas is the right route for us to take. It has another big advantage, which I see it, that we get the experience on how to handle gaseous fuels, which will help us to move towards hydrogen ultimately. And therefore, as we have seen the DTC fleet now, as per the Supreme Court direction again, one of the depot has been converted to HCNG. And where I think once we move from CNG, we can move to HCNG and then finally to hydrogen. So I think that is the way we have to go forward. And the government of India needs to maintain a certain parity between the CNG fuel and the gasoline, gaseous and the fossil fuels, diesel and petrol, so that the fleet owners and the consumer continue to according to that. So these are some of my initial thoughts, but yes, gaseous fuel is the way forward and to bridge the gap till we are finally able to move to zero emission vehicles in the country. Thank you, Deepangshu.
Sorry. Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Gandhi, for that. Gentlemen, we have got different perspectives, like Mr. Gandhi also said. Mr. Lee gave us a more of a global Asia-Pacific perspective. So let me start off with you, since we already have Mr. Gupta. We still have Mr. Gupta with us for some more time. Mr. Gupta, I wanted to understand, since you have said that DTC is looking at switching over to EVs gradually. So is there a thought within the government that CNG will not meet the future requirements that we have set as far as energy security and zero emissions are concerned?
That DTC actually procure the buses as per the government policy of Delhi government. But as on date, Delhi government is planning to switch over to electric buses because I think as per the Niti Aayog order, all the buses, buses has to be converted into electric buses mandatorily. So Delhi government is planning to switch over, but I'm not clear whether in future CNG buses will be procured or not. Because as on date, we are thinking of switching over to electric buses, but the future will depend on the policy of the Delhi government, whether CNG buses has to be run or not in Delhi.
Sure. Mr. Seng, I wanted to come back to you on the role that gaseous fuels play in energy security. If you can give us and our delegates today a perspective on that, as well as gaseous fuels' role in terms of getting to carbon neutrality. Your perspectives on that, please. You're on mute, Mr. Seng.
Sorry, Deepangshu, if you permit me to do.
Sure, Mr. Gupta. Sure. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you for participating.
Thank you, Mr. Gupta. Thank you for the valuable information on the DTC.
Thank you, sir.
Thanks, Gupta ji.
Yes,
Okay.
Mr. Seng.
Okay, we know that the world still runs on oil and gas, especially now gas is becoming a commodity. You can have LNG shipped to your houses or your country anywhere in the world. So the role of gas is going to be there for a long time. And the beauty about gas is that there is an opportunity, from my perspective, is that there's opportunity to utilize biogas, which is quite abundant in countries like India or in this part of the world. You upgrade biogas, you become same compositions as fossil natural gas. So it's basically the same. So with that, you can probably supply 20 or 10 to 20% of your energy need from biogas upgrading. And as you can understand, if you're looking at the future, full electrification is going to be a big challenge. It will take a long time. Maybe, to me, the infrastructure have to build, the grid have to be upgraded, and all these things. So meanwhile, you need to get gas. Like India, you are importing LNG and all these things. Every country is importing LNG or oil. So from our perspective, gas is going to be there. It's an important role to play. And you want to move away from oil, because oil is very volatile and it's much more expensive than gas. So from what I think, the gas is going to be here. Like it or not, you got no choice. And the role, the beauty is that it can be carbon neutral, because if you use it from biogas, which is from waste, you can position it as a renewable green gas. And to be honest with ourselves, there is no one fuel that can meet the entire country needs. The question whether gaseous fuel can supply all the energy need of a country, no. Can gaseous fuel supply all the transport sector energy need? No. So electricity, yes, can, but it will take a long time. And electricity have to be generated from oil, gas, solar, wind. So I think that there is something that we should be aware of. For example, now at DTC, I heard that they're going to shift to fully electric 2025, when all the buses, car buses will be retired. That's 3 years from now. DTC have about what, 6,000 buses running, or like 4,000 CNG buses. Can you achieve that within 3 years? I think it's a big challenge. So we should, and moving to hydrogen, yeah, it's good. Hydrogen is zero emission, but the production of hydrogen, the transportation, all these things is still not there. So it's still expensive. So in the meanwhile, you have to go something that is already there, natural gas. And our association want to push it, that natural gas can be carbon neutral by using biogas as complementary to the fossil natural gas. And like I say, maybe you can't move all the vehicles to natural gas. Maybe the passenger car light duty goes to electric. The heavy duty vehicles, especially the freight vehicles, can still go to natural gas or go to bio CNG or bio LNG. Okay, that's my take on this natural gas thing. Don't forget, it's still there. You still need to use it. Okay.
You still need to use natural gas, as Mr. Seng said. Mr. Gandhi, you also mentioned that the biggest challenge to CNG or natural gas vehicles today is EVs. But some of the targets that we have set for EVs seem to be unrealistic in terms of the deadlines that we are picking. So that the industry or stakeholders, all stakeholders can do to sort of ensure that natural gas vehicles or CNG, LNG get their due in the sector?
Well, Deepangshu, that's a very pertinent question, and that's what we have been debating in CAPR also. We strongly are of the view that till we are able to achieve 100% EV, which could be at least 25 years away from today, we need to have a strategy for bridging that gap from now to 25 years, 2047. So which means that this 25 years gap which we have, we need to form a strategy by using various alternate fuels available meeting the twin objective of the government, which is Atmanirbhar Bharat, means we need energy security and at the same time zero emissions, because automotive vehicles are the biggest emitter of fuels. And as I was mentioning, that we have the dubious distinction of having some of the most polluted cities in the world. And we also, to have energy security, as I think Lee has very rightly pointed out, we need to talk about bio-CNG in a big way. We have to talk about biofuels. We need to talk of the government of India is talking about. We're talking about multi-fuel vehicles or your flex fuel vehicles. So I think all these have to fit into a strategy which is formed as a way forward. And that's very important. But you can't wish away a fuel for another fuel. So we have to have a gaseous fuel as a distinct use in our country for the foreseeable future. But as rightly said by Mr. Gack, we need to gradually move to bio-CNG to the extent possible so that we don't have to import, and also we can use our resources more efficiently.
A follow-up question, Mr. Gandhi, what are some of the efforts that are being made, let's say, in India today to switch from natural gas to renewable natural gas?
Well, I don't have much detail of it, but yes, there are big efforts are going underway. And as you know, some of the big business houses are already investing large sums into biofuels. So that I'm sure that as we move forward, bio-CNG will find a big place in our energy basket.
Sure. Mr.
Bala was saying something.
Yeah, Mr. Bala, I'll come to you with the same question. Mr. Gandhi actually mentioned that large corporate houses are committing huge amount of investments as far as as far as bioenergy is concerned for the future. So give us a sense of the kind of efforts that are happening in the country today, both from a policy perspective as well as industry's preparedness.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of discussion happening on availability of biofuels. Also some announcements from Reliance and all on availability of hydrogen. So multiple fuel options are being discussed. But if you look at market perspective or customer perspective, they were familiar with diesel. Today we cannot give in a fleet with multiple fuel options. At least from that point of view, CNG has some stability and clarity. Customer knows the fuel, the market is familiar with it, the market ecosystem is ready to deal with it. So I would like to quote back from Mr. Gandhi. The strategy and long-term plan are very critical. Like if if government decides no more, it's going to be only EV in buses, then no one is going to focus or take effort to provide a CNG bus or a LNG bus. If the doors are shut on that, people are not going to look at it. So ideally, the strategy should be to give a proportion, give a place for natural gas. It has its own advantages. Today, we are importing less than 50%. It is locally available. The technology has evolved. The customer is familiar. So there shall be some space given for what is available, what is established, rather than closing the doors on it. So that is one point. On the other point, though the experience of biofuels and other may be there elsewhere, our market is always unique. What is working elsewhere needs some tweak for us. Our right from the culture of maintenance to the operating environment, we are totally unique as compared to any other part of the world. So gaining experience needs some time. For us, when we introduced CNG, we had so many incidents, but it is not there now. The market has learned. So any new fuel, any new technology needs some time for us to percolate into the market so that we don't have issues related to safety, we don't have issues related to operating economics. So the multiple fuel options are welcome, but what is available in abundance, what is workable and economical for our country, we should stop with one or two and then go. Because if you look at industry perspective, we just now finished development of BS6 diesel engines.
Yes.
We have developed BS6 CNG engines. How many more development a company can afford when multiple fuel options evolve? Because each of them require a development cost, the change, you add more variety to the market. All this again gets into the product cost, and it goes to the customer. So to keep the viability, we should limit the number of fuel options available. If at all any long-term plan is there with the sure shot investments and infrastructure, we should plan and ramp it up slowly rather than having everything in multiple options need not to come immediately. We should have a gradual plan so that visioning, if it is done, maybe we can have one or two more fuels before we completely look at it.
Sure. While that is a desirable situation, Mr. Bala, we don't seem to have clarity as far as how this is going to be rolled out in the country in the coming years. Mrs. Seng, I wanted to come to you with a question on what are some of the key global learnings in this area that India as a nation can adopt? You're on mute again, Mr. Seng.
Okay, sorry. Okay, can you hear me now? Yeah. Okay. That reminds me of what my friend told me now. That a long time ago. We all have the same global issues, but we need a local solutions. So the issues is the same everywhere. Whatever you have there in India is the same as whatever you have in China or in Malaysia, everywhere. But the solution have to be a local solution.
Sure.
Like Mr. Bala was saying, it have to be a local solution. And like, for example, price stability. As a customer, like Mr. Bala said, as a customer, I want to be sure that I always have cost saving if I use CNG. Not when someday the price of diesel is cheaper, the other day the price of diesel is more expensive. I have yet to see a country that have a pricing policy stated officially that don't worry, as far as we are concerned, the government will control the price of CNG to be at least 40% cheaper than gasoline or diesel. And that's the formula. Whatever the volatility of the gas price, oil price, the customer is assured that he will have that always that saving. Because the only motivation for a person or fleet to use CNG or other alternative fuel, hydrogen or electricity, will be price. Money in the pocket. So the clarity, the stability of whatever it is, I will always save money on CNG. Then I will commit my money to that. If not, like for example, now the price of diesel go down, the price of CNG goes out, the gap become like 10%. So there is no stability there, clarity there. The other one is, I have yet to see a good policy in terms of transport fuel policy. We have energy policy for the country, energy basket mix, all these things. But for the transport fuel policy, like Mr. Bala said again, you have to be, for an OEM to do multi-fuel, it's going to be disaster. A lot of allocation, R&D, all these things. So there must be a policies to say that, for example, how many percent of the transport sector use oil, use gasoline, use diesel, use CNG, use electricity, and use hydrogen. Of course, in the long term, everybody wants to use electricity. But then I think that is still, the jury is still out there, because if there is enough electricity, but the electricity will still come from somewhere, from gas, from oil, all these things. Yeah. So there must be clarity, stability there. Okay. For example, now we know that electricity is here. So maybe the government say, okay, no more CNG cars will be promoted, only electric cars. And buses, maybe certain buses is suitable for electric, but long distance buses is not suitable for electric. So there is no clear policy. I think that policy is needed. Transport fuel policy, and what segment of the transport is targeted for what kind of fuel. For example, there is a lot of, let's say, three-wheelers, tuk-tuk, using CNG. I think personally, I think they are good candidate for electric vehicles. So they shouldn't be promoted anymore to use CNG because of the issues of refueling, the cylinder, high pressures, and all these things. You need a lot of refilling stations for three-wheelers, but you only need a few for heavy-duty vehicles. So the investment and the saving in terms of environment is much more if you target heavy-duty user of the fuel. For example, diesel. The truck use a lot of fuel. A tuk-tuk, three-wheeler use very little amount of fuel, and yet he have to go back to the station 3 times a day, wasted about 2-3 hours a day, whereas he should be out there looking for customer. So that is a problem everywhere, but a local solution have to be found for it. Global issues the same, but you need a local solution. India have to look at its own solution. In fact, I used to tell people India is very good in terms of the CNG, because every time the CNG price is increased in India, there is no riot, no demonstration happen. Whereas you look at other countries, once they increase the price of CNG, there will be a lot of protests. There'll be rows of trucks parked outside the PTT office in Thailand. There'll be a lot of protests in that station, all these things. But India, somehow or rather, the customer is acceptable to that, the price increase of CNG. In fact, within 1 year, you increase 4 or 5 times. But other countries, they cannot afford to do it. So we can learn from that. And India also can learn from other countries, but you have to be a local solution.
Thank you. Thank you. So clearly, I mean, like Mr. Seng said, I mean, within consumers, there is acceptability for CNG in the country, right? But Mr. Seng, you also mentioned that one of the major obstacles as far as natural gas vehicles are concerned is that of infrastructure. Now, that is the same concern that we have with electric mobility, you know, shifting towards electrified vehicles. Now, for a country that has had some experience of being involved in natural gas, in creating an infrastructure, Mr. Bala, a question to you. Do you think India can potentially be self-reliant with gaseous fuels?
I think the numbers today available are showing 50% we produce in-house within the country, and 50% we still depend on imports. And the price fluctuations in the CNG are still unpredictable, because in Europe and other places it is used for house heating and other stuff related to the winter, summer climate-based changes. So though we are insulated 50%, remaining 50% has the volatility. So though we have good scope for self-reliance in meeting the requirements, but with expanded use in industry and other places, the risk element is still prevailing. So as per my understanding, we are not in a position to claim that we are self-reliant. So like other fuel, our dependence on import is going to cause concern in terms of availability and the price elements.
Mr. Gandhi, the same question to you on India being self-reliant with gaseous fuels. And a supplementary question would be, why haven't consumers accepted gaseous fuels as a primary propulsion technology, in terms of whatever we've seen in the last 20 odd years? And what are the ways forward, really?
We have been looking into this aspect as such, because I also own a CNG vehicle. The biggest point in my, again, going in for my next CNG vehicle is that I have to travel about 100 kilometers a day, 100 kilometers plus. And that's the average travel time for most of the people who would opt for a CNG vehicle because of the cost benefit which it gives, and of course the environment benefit. Which means that I have to stand in the natural gas CNG station queue every day. Because I can get a range of about 200 kilometers at the most with the gas being filled up. So I have to stand in the queue every day. So till we are able to shift over to to the range, anxiety is taken care of, people are not going to go for CNG in a large way. Similar concern with the EV. Now, EV, fortunately, they are now able to come up with a range of 400 kilometers. So in natural gas cars, particularly I'm talking about, we need to come up with a range of about 300 to 400 kilometers for the people to accept that CNG vehicles per se as an alternative to petrol or diesel vehicles. Unfortunately, in spite of the infrastructure, since 98, the infrastructure is coming up in a very big way across the country. Still, total country is not covered. And I think still we are only at about 2/3 of the country is covered by a CNG station. And that too, in most of the cities, there are not many CNG stations. And even in Delhi, which boasts, I think, of the maximum CNG stations, we still have long queues at every filling point.
All right.
So when we are talking about EV, ultimately, I think we have to learn from how we have progressed on the natural gas infrastructure, which has taken us more than 15 years today even, but still we are having a shortage of the infrastructure. So
Yeah,
way forward would be, we need to have a focused utilization of natural gas, EV, like tuk-tuk or three-wheelers in India, tuk-tuk in all of the Southeast Asian countries, could be a possible EV candidate. But when you talk about passenger cars, CNG could be a possible candidate. Two-wheelers which cannot run on CNG, EV could be a possible candidate. So if we are able to segmentize the utilization of the various fuels, the pressure on individual fuels will not be to that extent. And we would be able to, industry would have sufficient, two-wheel industry can know, okay, this is what is there for us. Heavy commercial vehicle industry, you know, okay, LNG is a possible way forward for us. And three-wheeler says, okay, we have to go for the EV route. So I think we need a transportation policy. But having said all that, gaseous fuel will continue to play a very important role. And we need to invest, and the government should, for example, should not have asked DTC, you switch over to electric vehicles. Like in 98, they asked them to switch over to CNG. Now in 2025, they ask him to switch over to electric. I think that's not the way forward. Each segment has to have its own emphasis.
Right. Mr. Gandhi, like you rightly said, each segment should have its own strategic or say specific strategy going forward. Could you, for the benefit of our participants today, could you give us a sense of what the government is thinking in that regard? Has there been any kind of discussions with the government for a transportation fuel policy that you've talked about?
Well, luckily I am part of some of the government think tanks on the subject. They also do realize now that different policymakers are promoting or making statements in the media which is confusing the industry. We have statements coming out from one ministry which is talking about flex fuel vehicles or 20% ethanol by 2025. Yeah. We have indications or statements coming out from another ministry which is talking about gaseous fuels in a big way. There is another statement which are coming out from the third policymaker, which is talking about, we should not talk about anything, we should only single-mindedly go towards EV. So we have been talking to them, and we have proposed a study to the government to look into these aspects. so that we could have a very focused transportation policy or a roadmap where the industry, both supplier industry, which is the alternate fuel industry, auto industry, and the consumer or the user industry, they have a proper roadmap for them so that we are able to use our resources most optimally and meet our twin goals of energy security and zero emissions.
Right. Mr. Bala, I'll come to you before I start taking questions from our audience today. We've been getting a fair amount of questions. This very issue of not having clarity, right, in terms of what is the roadmap for a particular fuel, and the constant sort of messaging coming out of the policymakers to focus on different sets of fuel options. What sort of a pressure that sort of brings to a manufacturer, and how does a manufacturer really approach such a situation?
You know, this dynamic situation is prevailing for past couple of years, as Mr. Gandhi told. You know, we get varying input from ministries, and internal strategy becomes difficult. You know, we are not able to. So, but this being a reality within SIAM, you know, we have separate.
I think we have.
You lost Bala?
Yeah, Mr. Bala, I think we've lost his connection. We'll probably come back to him a little later, but Mr. Seng, I'll take a question that we've received from one of our attendees today. It is directed to you. You said biogas is a better option, but what is preventing governments in many nations to accept that?
Very good questions. I was still thinking why, because the gas is there, it's good, but I think basically the biogas industry is a very small, fragmented industry. It's a low-level industry. You know, when you talk about biogas, you think about the houses with a few chicken farm, pig around, and then produce biogas, and it's also very scattered all around. So it's very difficult to capture it in one place. So it doesn't receive that kind of attention like an oil and gas industry. I used to tell my friend, if you go to an oil company and say, I got a project of $100 million, they will talk to you. And that is normally a very small project in the oil and gas industry. But you go to them and say, I got a biogas project. How much? 10 million, 5 million. It's small money. We don't want to talk about it. So the energy players is not interested in the biogas industry in most of the country, except now in Europe. If you look at Europe now, the gas company, oil and gas, is buying up all the biogas company and incorporated the gas supply into the pipeline. Sweden already achieved 100% renewable gas. They call it biomethane, applied into the pipeline. I think Europe is gaining more traction in terms of using biogas into the pipeline. Other countries, because like I said, the government have not really looked at it because it's a very small fragmented industry, and the energy company in this country have not taken it up. But I see India is good because I think India there's a good government policy say they want to build 30,000 bio-CNG station by what year, and there is a guarantee offtake of biogas or bio-CNG if you produce it by the gas company. So in short, the government have not paid much attention to this because the biogas industry is a very fragmented, small industry. I think they didn't look at it as a small value industry. But hopefully with this global warming issue, low carbon, net zero carbon neutral thing, maybe they will slowly look at the biogas industry as what is happening in Europe and America now. The renewable natural gas industry is receiving a lot of attention. So we just have to push the government. You have to make them excited about it.
Right. We have Mr. Bala back with us. Mr. Bala, if you could continue with your answer, please.
Yes, yes. So as SIAM, our focus is to work on support and list down the support points we need from government and continue to engage with them and seek. As I told, for gas-based mobility today, for us, the contents are price stability and what kind of incentives that can be given to gas mobility in terms of road tax or other one. I mean, we need not to match what is given for EV, but what benefits we can reap by going to CNG, those benefits or some policy corrections on those will certainly help us. So such measures as individual vertical teams within SIAM we are taking up.
Right, right. We have another question from Mr. Shashwat Tripathi. He wants to know, he says, do you think countries in Asia where electricity mix is more fossil-based and is not as clean as in Europe, shouldn't we focus more on HEVs instead of EVs and rather focus on cleaning the electricity mix in parallel and shift towards EVs only when the electricity mix is relatively green? Who would take that? Mr. Gandhi?
Yeah, I fully endorse the viewpoint of him. And till we have green electricity, but my question here is slightly more to other panelists also. If we are able to have green electricity, will it not be a more prudent to go for green hydrogen and take the final step towards zero emission vehicles? Because hydrogen has another big advantage compared to the EV. Today, as pointed out, we have in India only about 30 million IC vehicles, and a huge infrastructure for IC components is available. So when we have green hydrogen, we can easily use that infrastructure and we do not have to develop altogether a new infrastructure. So the better option would be go to the ultimate fuel from green electricity. Once we have, we should go for green hydrogen. And I'm happy that the government of India has now taken an initiative on green hydrogen, and they are going to give a lot of support to that sector. Because then we would be able to use our existing IC infrastructure more efficiently, and we would not have to still depend upon import of, today we are importing fossil fuel, then tomorrow we will be importing nickel, cadmium and other base earth metals, which will still keep us open towards energy security will still be an issue. So the best option would be jump to green electricity and green hydrogen, and not the EV route, but the hydrogen route. That's my take on the subject, which will, we're going to use our existing infrastructure more efficiently.
Mr. Seng, your comments on the same? Would you concur with what Mr. Gandhi said?
No, I have a bit different opinion. I think because hydrogen, you still need to produce hydrogen, and you need to build infrastructure for hydrogen. And hydrogen infrastructure is not much different from the natural gas infrastructure, which will have a lot of challenges. So I agree that we have to move to green electricity. That's for sure. But going to green hydrogen, yeah, but I think there's still a long way to go for green hydrogen. The cost of producing hydrogen now is still expensive. So if we jump directly to hydrogen, concentrate too much on hydrogen, then maybe we are diverting from the path of. I think this path is to go for electrifications of the transport sectors, because when it comes to hydrogen, you still need to store hydrogen on board a vehicle at a very high pressure, and you still need to compress the hydrogen to probably now about 8,000 to 10,000 psi, whereas hydrogen CNG now is stored at 3,000 to 3,600 psi. So you need to resolve that. Unless you can produce hydrogen on board of the vehicle, so you don't have to store it. in high pressure cylinders. In fact, I saw in one chat that one person was saying that he saw an explosion of a CNG car recently, and whether that's dangerous or not. Well, CNG car is safe, but I guess if you don't follow the safety rules and regulations, you will get that kind of explosion. That is a 3,000 psi explosions. But if you move to hydrogen, you must think of about 10,000 psi explosions or 8,000 psi explosion. That will be a huge explosion if you don't resolve the safety issue and all these things. So when you move to hydrogen, there's challenges. It can be green hydrogen, but the technical requirement, the safety challenges will still be there. You need to resolve it. Even CNG, even today, we have not really fully resolved the issues. Off and on, we get explosion there, explosion here. It's sad to see that people get injured and all these things. But those things must be resolved right from the start. We just cannot jump straight away to that. And it's the opportunity that we learn from the ANGVA industry should be applied to the hydrogen vehicles and also to electric vehicles. We can see, I think maybe not many of us have read or see that electric vehicle, especially the previous model, just suddenly burst into flame and all this. And they have their issues, their challenges. So those things need to be resolved. Not only the fuel issue, the people issue. Does the people know how to use it, how to maintain it? And the vehicle itself, is it built safely? Is it be converted safely? And all these things. So this thing, like I said, the government seems to be in a hurry to push for EV and to push for hydrogen. Right. They did not see that. What can we learn from the CNG industry that can apply to the hydrogen for transport and also EV for transport? It's the same. CNG you have station problem. EV you have charging problem. CNG you have pressure problem. EV you have voltage problem. So it's the same. So yes, we can move. I think like actually back to the question. I think it's difficult for me to say which one is better. Like say it's a global solution, a global problem. You need a local solution. You have to look at India. Yeah, the electrification of India, the supply of electricity, where does it come from? The upgrading of the grid, and all the things that comes with the supply of electricity. And if you want to supply hydrogen, you have to think about all that thing also. So yeah, be aware about that. Yeah.
Mr. Bala, one final question to you in terms of maturity of the technology. When we look at natural gas vehicles, or we look at EVs, or we look at other alternatives, how mature has the CNG technology become in the country to sort of make it more mainstream in the country?
Yeah, I think today I would say, if you ask me to rank it, CNG is at par with diesel. CNG, the market is familiar. We have a diverse market with the maintenance being done from organized company-owned dealerships to roadside mechanic attending. So as Mr. Gandhi told, the CNG evolution has taken place over 15 years. So sufficient familiarization has happened across the country, across various segments of people who are involved in maintaining, owning and operating and handling a vehicle. So the ecosystem has grown across all throughout the country. So whatever can happen in a diesel vehicle can happen for CNG also in terms of maintenance, parts availability, or diagnosing any issues. So that maturity level is at most comparable to diesel. So if you ask me about EV or hydrogen, I know it is new to us. It is new to maybe a manufacturer can make a vehicle and give it. How it will behave in the market, how the customer will handle it, how the mechanic will handle it is unknown today. But it will evolve over a period of time. But we should give that percolation time so that there is no safety issue, so that there is no operating economy related issues. So we should allow the ecosystem to grow. So it cannot, from 2025 to EV can happen. Maybe it will happen. We may not be able to take a target like that for a hydrogen. So we should allow time for the technology to mature and grow.
Right. Right. We are coming close to the closure of this session, but there's one question that I wanted to ask all our panelists today. What would be needed to make gaseous fuels mainstream in a country like India? What are some of the steps that we will need to take to ensure that? I'll start with you, Mr. Gandhi.
I think very rightly pointed out as a very pertinent question. The steps which need to be taken to make CNG as a popular fuel is, number one, the cost differential between CNG and fossil fuels should be mandated. Whether it is 20%, 30%, 40%, whatever realistic value needs to be there, which will give a clarity to the investor, the consumer, and the manufacturer. Okay, so this is the cost differential I have, and they will accordingly build into this. So this is one of the most important things. And second, there should be a flip to the infrastructure so that the waiting time on the refilling station is minimized, and the government should give adequate benefit or give this industry status so they can get all the benefits. So these are the two steps which, in my view, need to be taken in this regard.
Thank you, Mr. Gandhi. Mr. Bala?
Yeah, I subscribe to what Mr. Gandhi told. One additional point I would like to mention with regard to the network expansion. The goods movement or passenger movement happen on a specific pattern. They connect to a specific city from around the villages, or the market movement happens between one market to other market. So there is very clear indication on typical range of the CNG vehicle. So rather than having 50 stations in one city, the situation or the location of stations should be such that the range is extended. Somebody today, if he is able to travel only 150 kilometers, adding 2 more stations, if it is going to increase the range of the vehicle to 300 to 500 kilometers, then the traction for switchover from diesel to CNG will increase. So the network expansion can happen with the customer usage study, and then we can use the fuel availability more effectively. So that's the one point I would like to add.
Thank you. Thank you. Mr. Seng, over to you, your final comments.
Okay, I think it's not much different from Mr. Gandhi. The most important thing is that because the ultimate success of the usage of the fuel will be the customer. So the customer must have clarity on the saving that we can save from using CNG, so gaseous fuel. So there must be consistently, persistently the same or within his range. And he's sure that it's going to last until he changes his car or something like that. So like Gandhi said, there must be a policy, government policy must be strong, must be clear. And I think the first one is customer must be happy, and customer is only depending on the price, money in the pocket. So you keep that clear to them, you get the market become mainstream. But to get that, the government policy must be clear and consistent, not that the next government come in, they change everything and that's it, everything goes down the drain. And then the third one, I think, is that there must be return on investment for all the stakeholders. You can keep mandated cheap, but then it's too cheap for the gas company and he don't make money. He probably follow the mandate for 2 years. After that, he say his station cannot run because of this. Actually, he don't make the money because you, as a businessman, you have to make money. So there must be a business case. So all these three components must be there to make it mainstream.
Wonderful. Yes? Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you, gentlemen, for answering all the questions. I'm sorry I couldn't take all the questions that we've received from our delegates today, but thank you for engaging in this very meaningful discussion on a very, very pertinent subject. Mr. Seng, thank you so much for joining us from Malaysia. Mr. Gandhi, Mr. Bala, truly appreciate your time. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone.
Bye.